This week's episode is brought to you by Julva. Julva is a product I use all the time. It is a wonderful, safe cream created by my friend, gynecologist, Dr. Anna Kabeka. It is formulated specifically for a healthy vulva. This is for your delicate feminine parts. It is a wonderful, non-toxic, healing cream that soothes, repairs, and rejuvenates the feminine you. Dr. Anna is a dear friend. I tested out this product several years ago, and I've been using it ever since. I told her she should call it the female Viagra. It's helpful for dryness. It's helpful for delicate, sensitive skin. Women have been using it who have urinary incontinence, painful intercourse due to vaginal dryness, and difficulty with arousal or orgasm. Julva cream is one of my absolute favorite products. You can get it with a 60-day money-back guarantee by going to herrulesradio.com/shop. Try Julva. Welcome back to Her Rules Radio. I'm Alex Jamieson, your hostess. This is the show where you come to learn how to live life by your own rules. And today we've got my sidekick, my co-host with the most, Eric Rubin. Hey, Eric.
Hi, everybody.
So tell me about the boundaries in your life, Eric. Do you have boundaries?
Well, of course I do. And they weren't always so well defined. But you know, what's funny is the first thing I thought of is, as you know, I've been an attorney for like 35 years. And there are professional boundaries for me that really need to be clear. I got to keep my personal feelings very separate from whatever's happening professionally with my clients. And not just my feelings, but, you know, I don't want certain clients to know where I live, for example, or who my relatives are. That's just one sort of boundary. But I think there are a lot of other boundaries. I know that I have certain friends who've made some choices that I'm not happy about, but I don't want to dismiss their friendship, and I don't want to be angry at them, but I also can't keep them as close to my heart as I may have in the past.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So here's the tough thing about boundaries, and I consider boundaries like how I want to be treated. It's kind of a line that people are not welcome across. Like, right. I will not be treated like this. And it's also a line that I don't want to go across. Like, I don't want to step over my own values or ignore my own needs. And it's tough when you start to get clear on what your boundaries are, which is why I think people have a hard time making them or decide they're just not going to do them, which is when you have them and then people start ignoring them, or, you know, when you start to stand up for them, you sometimes have to make decisions about, are these people still welcome in my life because they're not respecting my boundaries?
Yeah, I think it's what makes it hard. It doesn't have to be hard. I think what makes it hard is that we have a feeling of what we should do or how we should behave and how people will think of us, as opposed to what's our true north inside. It's like, you know, for instance, that you do not want to commit any crimes.
Correct.
Or no crimes where you're taking stuff that doesn't belong to you, right? And I would bet you almost all your friends agree with that. But what happens when a dear friend is like, I need you to hold this thing for me? And you're like, what is that? It's a thing I stole. Just as a random, this is, you know, just a hypothetical. You're not going to hold on to that thing. And you're really clear about it. There's nothing wrong with saying, I am not doing that. You know, and if your friend can't be your friend, then that's one of those things in life that just happens. And I think what happens for us is we get afraid we're going to lose, or we're going to be seen as, undesirable or whatever. But I think that's part of being an adult.
Well, so here's the tough thing. I didn't learn what boundaries were as a kid, as an adolescent, even as a young adult. I didn't know what they were until probably in the last 10 or 15 years.
Same here.
And by the time you're an adult and you have long-standing relationships with people, they expect you to be a certain way. They've known you a certain way. And if you now come up and say, actually, I don't like to be treated like this. I don't want this in my life anymore. I don't want to be abused in this way. I'm not available for this kind of behavior. Other people can freak the fuck out a little bit.
It's very interesting. This is related. I used to have this judgment about people who would have a spiritual breakthrough and then change their name. And I was like, that's a little highfalutin or a little affected.
Right. But John, now I have to call you Riverkeeper Ashaya or something. Right.
Right. And I feel like what feels like to me is it's a really great signal to other people. Like I'm not the 12-year-old friend anymore. I'm a different person. Mm-hmm. And that's, whether people listen to that or not, I guess is on them. But I actually like that idea. Now, I'm not changing my name, but I could see the advantage of that.
I actually changed my name when I was 12.
I didn't know that.
So my real name is Alexandra.
Right.
But my whole childhood, I was called Sasha. In fact, I didn't know my name was Alexandra on my birth certificate until I was like 5 or 6. Because my nickname, everybody just called me Sasha. My dad was really into Russian history and studied Russian, and I don't know. My mom gave everybody a nickname. So when I was 12, I decided I was too old to be Sasha anymore, and I wanted to be called Alex. And some people were like, okay. And other people were like, no, I'm calling you Sasha.
Right.
But actually, it ended up fine. Like, I realized that I wanted people to call me a certain thing. And for some people, my mom's side of the family, they started to call me Alex, and it was just weird. It just sounded weird. It's like, no, you call me Sasha. Everybody else can call me Alex.
Right.
So I understand that whole thing about like people changing their name or whatever. I'm like, you know what? It's totally up to the person. Like, why do I care what somebody else wants to be called?
Right. Exactly. And it's funny. I know we're talking about boundaries, but like, let's talk about relationships. Mm-hmm. Like, I have friends who, were dating opposite sex and then suddenly are dating same sex. Mm-hmm. Like, are you happy? Great.
Yeah.
Is it consensual?
Right.
Fantastic.
Right.
Why does anyone care about that? Not to get political, but I literally don't understand everyone why somebody cares who I sleep with.
Yeah.
Why is that your issue? Mm-hmm. In the same way that, like, when there are celebrities going through divorces, or like, I don't care.
Oh my gosh, I don't care.
I don't care. Like, I look at those People magazines, and I'm like, oh, this is like a sick culture. Like, your life should be more interesting than that magazine, and if it's not, you need to listen to this podcast. Get it together.
Well, no, it's interesting. I used to pick up a People magazine or an Us Weekly at the hair salon or at the airport. That's when I would go pick up a bunch of magazines, and I would get some celebrity gossip rag. And just over time, I was like, I don't feel good reading this.
Right.
It feels like exploitative in some way, or I know half of it's got to be untrue. It's just made up. And I just kept putting myself in their shoes. How would I feel if people were examining my life and making up shit about me all the time?
Well, I think it's happened to us on a very small scale. You and I have both had people lie about us on the internet.
Yes, we
have. And it was so upsetting to me. I can't imagine what it would be like if it was like, as I'm walking through my life, everybody's holding magazines with me on the cover talking about my heartbreak or my inappropriate behavior or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just, so boundaries are really, it's interesting. I think that we have to assert ourselves to have boundaries, but also it's really good to honor other people's boundaries. Mm-hmm. The problems we run into, I think, is when it's a unilateral thing and people are not honoring them. Mm-hmm. And then you run into the situation like you were talking about, it's like, do I keep this friend? Do we have to have a much stronger talk? Do we how do you do it?
Well, that's another conversation. How to end a relationship.
Well, we are experts.
Well, I've done it a lot. I don't know if that makes me an expert. But I think boundaries are a way to actually improve your current relationships because you have to know yourself and you have to be up to the task of changing and evolving with the other person and respecting them, getting to know them, caring enough about them to inquire, get curious about their boundaries, why they have them.
Listening. I feel like it's so much about listening. And I learned that, from some great teachers, and it's really made a big difference in my life. But in my relationship with a capital R and my relationships with small r, people have to be heard, mm-hmm. and not the quick back. Oh, so what you're saying is no, really listen to them without judgment. Really mm-hmm. have them feel heard and seen, mm-hmm. because nobody does that elsewhere. So it's good to be the home base for the person that you want to be loving.
Yeah,
and it will be reciprocated. That's my experience.
Yeah,
but also
by the good ones.
Yeah, but then also you'll actually know what to do.
Yeah.
It's rather than just open the box, take out the toy, and throw out the instruction manual, why not read the instruction manual? And the instruction manual
you're asking too much.
By listening to someone and say, there was a book, I'm not a big fan, but the Love Languages book, had a really great idea, which is find out from your partner, what is it that makes them feel loved? And they broke it down to a couple of things.
Yeah.
And I found out, for me, touch is number one. Mm. For some people, just spending time.
Yeah.
It does. And you're thinking, really? We're just going shopping. We're spending the day doing food shopping and running errands. You feel loved. Oh my God, do I ever? And it's okay. It's not what I would do, but let me put aside my judgment.
Yeah.
Really hear what you need and give you what you need.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're listening, my dear listeners, to this and thinking, okay, boundaries sound like a good idea. Alex and Eric are into them. How the heck do I do this? Well, have I got a show for you. I had a wonderful conversation with my dear friend, Terri Cole. She's a fabulous psychotherapist and a counselor and a wonderful mentor to many, many women. And she has a really great kind of big, bad, beautiful Boundary Bootcamp. And she's going to talk about...
It is also alliterative.
Very alliterative. Nice. And she's going to walk us through different kinds of boundaries, how to create them, why they're important. So stay tuned. Terri Cole, my big, beautiful boundary badass babe. Hi, welcome back to Her Rules Radio.
Why, thanks, Alex. I'm so excited to be here.
Okay, so we're talking boundaries today. And this topic is probably one of the most uncomfortable for my ladies. They know they want them. They know they need them. They don't know how the heck to make them or stand up for them. So please talk about, first of all, what a boundary is for anyone who is a little bit confused about what we're talking about.
Okay. There's a couple of definitions. There's two that I like very much. I didn't really need to make up my own because they were already out there. So Brene Brown has a beautiful, very simple definition, which is letting the people in your life know what is okay and what is not okay with you. So that's pretty simple.
I like it.
And then emotional boundaries. I like this description because it's true, which is, there's 4 different kinds of boundaries, but emotional boundaries are knowing where you end and the other person begins.
Yeah. Okay. So this isn't just something that you have with your husband or your boyfriend or your girlfriend. This is something that you have with your children.
Yeah.
With your boss, with your employees. Is it a different process to figure out what we need with each person? Like, how do you get there when you finally figure out what your boundaries are? okay, wait, back up. I got to, like, there's so many things you have to do before you get it set with another person.
Yeah.
First of all, you have to figure it out in yourself. How do we start?
Well, part of it is listen to your body, because when you're in a situation, when you're in an interaction, when you start to feel constricted, annoyed, you start to feel angry, you start to feel short-tempered, you have to stop for a moment, because this really means a need is not getting met, or perhaps a boundary has been crossed. So the first thing is to look at, are you dialed in enough to your own physical body to notice the cues when you're starting to get annoyed or pissy about something? Something is happening. So that's one way. Another
okay, hold on. Talk about some of for someone who is not well versed in that language of their body, what are some of the common symptoms, the physical feelings that they will notice when they are crossing a boundary?
Right. Or when someone else is crossing a boundary, because you may not feel almost anything when you're crossing a boundary because you may not know it if the person isn't telling you. But if someone is crossing your boundary and in a way that you don't like, a boundary violation is happening, then you may feel angry. You may feel physically, you may have it in your chest, a constriction, like a tightness in your throat. It may be hard to talk. You may start getting a pounding headache. You could have a pain in your back. So this frustration or this feeling either unimportant, marginalized, or violated, because, there are boundary violations, creates this physical sensation in your body. You also may notice that you may start shit-talking the other person in your mind, or you may start being mean to yourself. Well, of course it happened again because you didn't speak up, you idiot. Like, we can be very mean to ourselves, having that mean chick inside. So it's also pay attention to what narrative is rolling around in your brain and when did it start? Because we can usually, from a therapeutic point of view, I can usually help people find like the precipitating event. Like, what was the moment? What was the comment? Was there a tone of voice? Did someone not do what they said they were going to do? And now suddenly you're in a bad mood. I'm putting air quotes around that, because most of the time, unless there's, hormonal and chemical things going on, most of the time you don't just momentarily get into a bad mood. Usually we can point to something that's happened.
Okay. So you start to clue in. That's one of the ways that you start to feel what you're literally feeling when your boundaries are violated. Mm-hmm. What's the next step? How else do you know that something might be a boundary for you?
Well, part of it is I have this whole checklist in the actual Boundary Bootcamp course itself, where we do a very extensive list of what is okay and what is not okay with you in every single area of your life. Your physical space at work, at home, your car, the way that you are communicating with your love relationship, your friends, your family, every part of your life. Because so much of the time, clients of mine, and my demographic is like women who really do have it going on. And this part of their life is hard for them to figure out, because they'd rather work themselves to death, do it all on their own, than figure out what, like make someone else do something or have a boundary conversation simply because they don't know how to have it. So when you start to look at all areas of your life, you start to basically take an inventory of is it not okay with me at work that it's always extremely loud, or that the person next to me has a radio on while I'm trying to work, or whatever it may be that is coming into your space or violating your space. So after you feel the constriction, so let's just take it to the next step of how can you, once you're aware of it, what then do you do?
Yeah, because usually boundaries involve other people. And figuring out how to communicate your boundary in a way where other people hear you and have empathy for your boundary and then respect your boundary might not always be the easiest thing to figure out.
And it's definitely not the easiest thing to figure out in the moment. So I always will ask people to, once you start feeling the signs, because when you dial in, trust me, you will feel them, that before you get into that heated conversation or before you lash out, to take a deep breath and do what I call a pattern interrupt. right? Don't just go down the way this would normally go. So let's say you're getting into something heated with your spouse or even with a friend. If you would normally go into becoming silent, being withdrawn in anger as your unverbalized boundary, right? This is your way of expressing your dissatisfaction. Or you might have a heavy sigh, or you might roll your eyes, or you might slam a door, or you might walk away. Before you take any of those indirect, ineffective actions, consciously buy time and just say, you know what, I actually am going to use the ladies' room. I'll be right back. Or I'm going to go get it. Can we just, table this for a minute? I'm going to go get a glass of water. Give yourself time to breathe.
Sorry, this reminds me of something. I had a conversation with my son's sex ed teacher because he was coming up with questions for me. I mean, he's 11 now. That started over a year ago. It was like, I don't know how to answer this. And she said, great. Just give yourself some time. Say, honey, I'm so glad you asked that question. Let's talk about that tomorrow after breakfast. Or, oh, that's a great question. Let's talk about it after dinner.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, that is the most brilliant thing. I could do that all throughout my life.
Yes. Here's the thing. Then the chickens come home to roost and you actually need to have the conversation or draw the boundary. So we're buying time so that you can get into yourself and start to understand. There are a couple of things that can happen with boundary issues, with boundary problems, because so much of the time, Alex, we're not just dealing with the here and now. So much of the time there are historical, unresolved injuries from childhood, from previous relationships that emotionally could be driving your behavior in this moment. So I have a little tool that I give to people that they can use, which is called the 3 Qs tool, which is the 3 questions tool, that how you know that you might be having a transference is that you get really hot really fast. And if the heat that you're experiencing is really big, for when you really think about it, the situation, like you're so mad at something and you're like, I think I'm more mad than this actual situation is calling for. When you take a break, when you do the pattern interrupt, then you ask yourself the 3 Qs. Who does this person remind me of right now? The second question is, where have I felt like this before? And the third question is, why is this behavioral dynamic, the way that we're interacting, why is it familiar to me? So to give an example, because it'll be easier with an example, I once had a boss where I used to work at this. It was an internship for grad school, actually. And I just had a massive dislike for this person. And actually, I was really intimidated by him and afraid of him. But I didn't say that. I would go into my therapist and be like, he's just a jerk. He's just cold. He's just judgmental. He just doesn't care. Oh, Brooks Brothers suit wearing, golfing and reading Wall Street Journal. He's just a jerk. So this was my take on it. Okay. I would avoid this guy who was basically my boss. He owned the drug treatment clinic that I was working at. If he was walking down the hallway, I would jump into the bathroom to avoid him. I would never talk if he was in a meeting. And finally, my therapist was like, okay, so that description, he's tall, he's good looking, he even has dimples, Brooks Brothers suit, wearing Wall Street Journal, reading, golfer. This guy doesn't remind you of anybody, Terry? And I was like, oh my God, how embarrassing. I mean, I was almost a therapist and I was like, wow, okay, so he's my father. She's like, yes, he's your father. And here's what's happening. This is when I created the 3 Qs from my own experience. She was like, Terry, do you know why we care? I was like, well, because A, it's embarrassing that I was projecting all these qualities onto this guy that I don't even know he has. She was like, okay, well, don't judge yourself and don't be embarrassed. But here's the thing. This guy will never see how smart you are, how capable you are. He's the person who owns the place. Don't you want a job at this place when you get out? I was like, yes, I do. She was like, okay, how will you're relating to him like you're 10. Your 10-year-old self is relating to your boss. Not the best career move, And so I was actually able to, just through that knowledge of oh my gosh, my fear, because I had such fear of my own father growing up, was really getting in my way. And so I was able to stop doing that. Of course, I cozied straight up to this guy and was like, I have an idea for a group that we should do and la, la, la. And I got hired. I graduated at that place.
Amazing. So this is just one tiny example of how figuring out your past to help you get clear on your present can help you, not only break through some challenges, but figure out what your boundaries are. figuring out what they are, and then expressing them to other people. And not just expressing them to other people, like people who love you are going to do their best to respect your boundaries, but you have to respect your boundaries first and foremost.
Yes.
So what are the top challenges that women have in being a stand for their own boundaries?
Listen, we have to go up against all of the myths and all of our societal brainwashing around what is feminine and what makes a mother a good mother and how women should be. And so we've learned all of these things that actually get in the way of us being able to create these boundaries, because what are the biggest myths? Boundaries push people away. Boundaries mean I'm mean. It has to be that I'm mean. Boundaries make me selfish. And so what I like to say about boundaries, because this is the truth about boundaries, is that it's possible to draw boundaries with ease, grace, and when appropriate, love. And the reality of boundaries is that it is the most loving thing that you can do in any personal relationship and the most effective thing that you can do in any business situation, because what you're doing is setting everyone up to succeed. Nobody knows your boundaries unless you tell them. They're so personal. And I also think it's important that we make the distinction, Alex, between what is a boundary that is more of a preference. What is a boundary that is a deal breaker? Because some boundaries that we draw, I teach people to prioritize their preferences, which we're not taught to do, but it's important that you do that, because even in small ways, your partner, the person you work with, they may want to know, they may care. If every time someone asks you about something, oh, what do you want to do for lunch today? And you say, yes, whatever you want to do, you're endlessly teaching people, because we've learned that we don't want to be a troublemaker, a pot stirrer, or a complainer, right? You don't want people thinking you're a complainer or like you're a troublemaker. The reality is not telling people your preferences, even the small ones. You're really robbing them of the opportunity to more intimately know you, to more authentically know you. If it doesn't even need to be intimate, right? Because it could be a work setting. But saying your preference, if you're not a morning person, let's say, and if you have the luxury to go into work in the morning, and if you can spend the first hour doing what you want in solitude, and you have an office, then you need to tell people, hey, the first hour of the day is mine. This is when I do my coffee, I do my rituals, whatever it is, or don't tell them anything. Just put up the do not disturb sign. And instead of, I had this situation once, it was so interesting. I had someone who was from Europe who was actually staying at my house, and it was kind of a work situation that we were in, and it all went to crap after it was just too long that the person was here. Anyway, as it was going to crap, she says, and you get up in the morning, all you want to do is talk, talk, talk. And I was like, well, had you clued me into your preference of a silent, I have a niece who comes and stays with me. I don't talk to her for the first hour of the day. I hand her black coffee. I go outside and meditate. She does her thing. I'm happy. I am happy.
You got to tell me what you want, girl.
Right? How the hell? I was so pissed. I was like, that's why it's not working, because you're not psychologically healthy. But anyway.
Right. Well, okay. So boundaries also, they take us out of this friction that a lot of women have, which is trying to be mind readers so that we don't have to ask and be really clear, right? We're going to try to, and many of us are very empathic, or we see what people need before they do, so especially if we're caretaking for the people or in our primary close relationships, we know the person so well, we know what they need before they do, but that's not always true.
Yes. And it's also not, what you're doing is you're training people that they don't need to speak up. And what I find even more common, Alex, is that women expect other people to read their mind. And we have all these lies that we tell ourselves so that we are not required to draw boundaries or speak up or tell the truth about how we feel about things by being like, well, any normal person would have known that. Come on, it's obvious. If you were raised right, you would have known that was the wrong thing. All this judgment.
That's just rude.
Yes, exactly. They're just rude. You know what? Even if they are just rude, maybe all of those things are true, and you still are required to draw your boundary, because here's the reason why. Here's another reason why, besides setting up your relationships to succeed, is that our healing, our own personal healing, comes from having the courage having the ovaries to stand up and say it. It is not about the other person always acquiescing to what we want. I had a situation when I was graduating grad school, and the same father I was terrified of, the only one that I've ever had. I said to my therapist, I'm not even going to invite my father because he was already retired and he lived in Florida. I'm not even inviting him to my NYU graduation because I know he's not going to come. And she was like, well, can I weigh in on that? I was like, sure. And she's like, Tara, why do you want him to come? And I was like, because he's my only father and because I'm really proud and because I think he should be proud too. And I want him to be, or whatever. I want to share it with him, this and that. And she was like, okay, so you should invite him anyway. And I was like, that just seems like just setting me up for disappointment or whatever. And she's like, and you're not that fragile. What you're really doing is showing yourself that you're grown up, first of all, and that what you want matters and that you can accept it if you can't do it. So then I'm terrified. Now I have to do it because it's like a therapy assignment. I'm like, crap. So I go down to I wait till the last day. I'm visiting him in Florida. I'm leaving to the airport. And I was like, sweating, armpits, crotch, feet, everything. I'm just dripping sweat. I'm so scared. I have hives. And I'm just like, I have to do it. I can't go back and tell Ruth I didn't do it. Right. So I was like, so Dad, my graduation is May, whatever. And he's like, yep. And I was like, and, it'd be great if you could come. And he was like, Tara, he hated New York City, even though he worked there for years. He was like, gotta say, I don't think I can do it. And I was like, okay. And then he goes, here comes the guilt, which was like the weirdest thing to say. I was like, dude, I've exchanged about 1,000 words in my entire life with you and I'm already 30. I don't think I'm going to guilt you. But I was able to say, now here's the opening that Ruth was talking about. I was able to say, Dad, it's definitely not about making you feel guilty. Mom will be there. Kath will be there. My sister had a baby 5 days before my graduation and was there with the infant, right? I was like, Mom and Kath will be there, but you're my only father. And I can completely accept without hard feelings that it's too much for you to do. I really can, but I needed to ask you because you're the only dad that I have. And he was like, okay, well, hopefully you'll come back down again soon and whatever, right? So we ended that. I left. I felt like I had been reborn in this relationship. Like I have chills right now. I can almost bawl my eyes out thinking about it. It was so transformative. And now my relationship with him changed so much after that. He sent me this little charm, this little graduation hat thing. He wrote this thing. My father, who was like, emotional IQ of my sneaker, no offense, a very smart guy, extremely successful, but emotional IQ, no. He wrote this thing. I'm so proud of you. And I understood what Ruth was saying. Boundaries, letting people know who you are, effective communication, being authentic. This is part of being known.
This is so key. One of the core top values for all the women who come to work with me, probably the ones who come to work with you too, is authenticity. This drive for real, for being seen, for showing up and speaking their truth. And it's so hard, right? Yeah. In so many ways, they're totally authentic. In so many ways, they're seen for how unique they are. But there's these like deep-seated childhood things that you're talking about that show up. And it's like the hardest thing to get clear about, draw a boundary for, stand up for it, be consistent for yourself. But so this transformed your relationship with your father.
It did.
How have you, because you are about to host and lead this amazing, big, beautiful, badass Boundary Bootcamp. I know that's not exactly what it's called, but it's pretty close. And you've done this before. You've been in this boundary work, leading these online programs with women for a while now. What have you seen? Like, what's another example of a way that a woman has transformed her life by standing for her boundaries after getting clear about them?
Oh my God, there's so many stories, but
pick a couple.
I'm going to pick a couple. Well, one which is one that wasn't even that dramatic, but it was, which is that a woman who'd been married to a guy who was kind of a cowboy. They live on a farm and he's not much of a talker. And she learned within the course itself to share her preferences, to just say, you know what, I would prefer this. And she was like, as if their whole relationship changed, that he was so excited to sort of be her hero, to do these small things that he was capable of doing to make her life easier. And she had no idea that he would respond that way. She thought he would see her as being complaining or too particular. And what happened, she was like, everything, sex is amazing. Like, we've been married 23 years. And she's like, there's this new heat in the sex department because of this. And that's just one very basic shift. But then you have people who've done major changes within their life. I've had people who ended up leveling their businesses because they realized that they were a bad boundary boss, that they had bad boundaries with the people who were subordinate to them. And the people who worked for them felt like they had to take care of the boss. With learning that that's not appropriate boundaries and not to share your personal stuff with people who work for you, right? You have friends, you have a therapist, you don't need to do it there. That doesn't make a close team. It actually burdens the team. When this woman was able to change that and then put her focus on the workers themselves and giving them, instead of sucking up the attention on her, she was now able to put a spotlight on them. She said her productivity within her small company itself, I think within 8 months, the productivity went up like 38% or something really phenomenal. And listen, she wrote to me saying, this is a direct result of learning these skills that I just didn't know. Then you have family of origin stuff where people, they go back to their family. It's a toxic family. And they had no idea that they were allowed to draw boundaries. One person, and this was life-changing for her, went back home because she doesn't want to cut her whole family off. But she does say they drink too much. It's, they always go into these old roles when she ends up being home. So first of all, I convinced her that staying for 4 days and 3 nights is plenty. That just anything longer than that, you don't need to, especially when you know by day 5, everything goes really bad. And that she didn't have to stay at her mother's house.
Oh my gosh. Can I just talk about this for a second?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So actually my husband, over the last few years, we've figured out that he needed to have some boundaries with his family. And it was about limiting to 2 nights, staying at a hotel, not in the house. And he just got back and he was like, that was the best visit I've ever had with my mother. Like life-changing possibilities. It's huge.
But what's amazing about that, Alex, is that until you guys probably talked about it or like with this woman, it never entered her mind that she could do that because she was like, my mother will be so mad, everyone will be hurt. And I said, here's the thing. Now, this is the part where you can draw the boundary with love, which is that I'm not doing this to make you mad, right? This is not about you, Mom. This is about what I need. I love you. I can't wait to spend time with you. And I know that this is going to be better time because of it. I don't sleep well because the beds aren't comfortable at your place and it's hot. And I really need some restorative time for me. So if you make it personal, Mom, that's you making it personal, but I promise you it's not. And I bet we'll have the best time ever.
Yeah.
Right? So you can learn the language of doing it with love. And also stand firm in your boundary. I want to talk about something though, Alex, because this brings up the whole thing of people having boundary bullies in their lives. Well, a boundary bully is someone who tramples on your boundaries and who really wants what they want, regardless of what you want. Could be someone who has some narcissistic tendencies, could also just be someone who's completely used to you being like, everything is fine, whatever you want. See, we train people, right? So when I teach this, I say, listen, before we categorize someone as a boundary bully, I need to know that you've actually tried to draw a boundary with them. So if they're just a boundary bully in your mind and you've never said anything, they're not. They still fall into the category of first-time boundary offender, is what we call them. Then you move into, if you've multiple times tried to set the same boundary with someone and they don't care and they continue to, so I'll give an example. I had someone in my course who had a boss that was a client who over one weekend they had to work. And so she had to give the client her cell phone. But it was only for that weekend because it was something that was launching on a weekend. But normally they would interact through Slack or some other online service, basically not so personal. The client kept then using her cell phone and texting her, even though he was really not supposed to. And so she was like, he's a boundary bully. I was like, have you told him to stop texting you and that your cell phone is only for personal use? She was like, well, no, but he knows that because I was like, no, he doesn't. And he's still right now. He's falling into the boundary first-timer category until you draw that boundary firmly with kindness, not wavering, like you know that this is what you're doing. Now let's see, but you have to have the conversation. So those are the distinctions. And honestly, when she did have the conversation, hey, Bob, I know that you or Billy or whatever the guy's name was, I noticed that you continue texting me and I'm going to ask you to please actually get in touch with me for Slack. The phone was really just because we were launching that Saturday, and I don't check my phone very often. And when I'm at work, I actually have my phone off all day. So if you text me, I don't get it. So the most effective and efficient way for you to get in touch with me is as we were doing it through our group Slack chat or whatever it is. And got to say, guess what? Bob, Billy, whatever his name was, never texted her again. So we were watching this all play out within the group because she was like, no, I know it. He's just a bully. I was like, no, you just have not actually effectively drawn a boundary. And so for those people listening, we have to think about, what does it mean to effectively draw a boundary? Being annoyed, waiting a long time to get back to someone. Yeah. That's not effectively drawing a boundary. Being sarcastic, sending a passive aggressive smiley after saying something bitchy. See?
I mean, this is about clarity. It's about getting clear. And, it's okay if it's not perfect the first time, right? And that's what's so great about your course. And you even have a free challenge that leads up to the course. We want to talk about that. But you help people practice so that they can get it right in their real life. And then how to deal with it when it isn't even 100% after the practice. Like, that's okay. It's a process of learning.
Yes. So, and it's messy. Here's the thing is that it's messy in the beginning. And I always say, listen, we can get graceful later. We just got to do it. And in the course itself, I provide what's called the Boundary Bible. And in this is a super comprehensive guide with all the words in the world, the phrases, all nonviolent communication stuff. I've actually taken 4 different ideas that I've put in there of other people who are just doing it so amazingly well. Like, why do I need to reinvent the wheel? I don't. But then I also have my own version. So that in any scenario you would find yourself, you would at the very least have like 4 phrases that you could say. So 2 that I feel like would be helpful that I could share right now, and then we definitely will talk about the free challenge.
Great.
Is that if you have something that you need to ask someone and you want to ask them to stop doing something, let's say, you can always start it with, I'd like to make a simple request. Because the truth is, every request is simple. It's simple to just make it. Whether the person will do it or not, that might be another story, but your asking of it can be very simple. So let's say she used it with the client situation. She could have said, oh, hey, Bob, I'd like to make a simple request that you go back to using Slack for all communication. We were only the text because of that special situation, and I don't check my email and I don't check my text during the day, and I don't want to miss anything from you. So please exclusively use Slack. So we get clear, we kind of reiterate what it is. Now you can provide context if you want to, which is not the same as convincing someone you have a right to draw this boundary, right? Especially in my personal relationships, I a lot of times do want to provide context because it's the truth and I want the person to know why I'm making the request, because I do want them to know me. In a business one, I don't give the personal context as much because it's not necessary and or appropriate, right? So another thing to think about if you're making a request, if someone, let's just say you want to draw a boundary and you've been invited to something that you don't want to do, you don't want to go to, but it's someone who you really like. You start with something positive. You know what, Alex, I so appreciate that you always think of me when you have fun things to do. I really, really value the fact that you invite me to these things. So I want to say thank you. And I actually can't do the thing on the 20th because I'm going to be traveling, because I'm already committed, because I'm exhausted, because I'm launching, because whatever. But when you start it with a positive, it's a much less confronting conversation, no matter what boundary it is that you're drawing.
Yeah, that's really sweet. That's so helpful for those of us who still have that old voice saying boundaries are bitchy.
Yes.
They're not.
They're really not. Boundaries are beautiful, which is why I created the Big Beautiful Boundary Challenge. So shall we discuss?
Let's talk about this because it's coming up. And this is you have a few days of like free, like, let's do a little taste test. I'm going to like go to 31 flavors and take some scoops and see which one I like best, right?
I sure do.
The challenge.
I sure do. The challenge is completely free. And actually we ended with a masterclass. And I got to say, I think people are going to get 31 flavors because there's a ton of value in this. And yeah, people have loved it. And last year too, but I did some different content this year and different ideas. So we're going to it starts on September 10th. And it goes to the 14th. So we have each day, I'll be meeting live in my Facebook group at 1:00. I'll be giving the challenge prompt. And then we move into meeting later in the day, there'll be a post where we can share. So each one of the days is something different. Questioning if there are non-priority people in your priority seating in your life is one of them. Passive aggressive smiley is another, where we're going to be talking about indirect communication. What else are we doing? We've got a whole bunch of different things that I'm going to be covering. And then we're moving into the masterclass where I'm going to be covering how to spot and disarm a boundary bully.
So valuable. So this whole free week of challenge that's coming up starting on the 10th really lays the foundation for anyone. And then you have an incredible program that people will learn about, through the challenge, during the masterclass, et cetera. But you're going to get so much value out of this free challenge that starts on September 10th. So I really want people, we're going to put the link where to go in the show notes here. And if you're on Facebook, then I will put the link here as well. Terri, this work is so important. And I know for women who are already successful and smart, this is one of those things that's it's the personal work, in quotes, that can lead to such whole life success, including professional success.
It's amazing how much joy, because part of it is what boundaries will do for the very successful woman is create the internal peace and tranquility that she's missing.
Yeah, baby. Love it. Terri Cole, thank you so much. I'm so excited for all my listeners who are going to go check out your big, beautiful Boundary Bootcamp coming up. And we'll see you back here on the show sometime soon.
Yeah, you will. I can't wait for the challenge. Thanks, honey.
So excited that you're going to be back here with me for this brand new season of Her Rules Radio. Now, I wanted to make sure that you knew about two very cool things happening. First, my husband, Bob Gower, and I wrote a new book called Getting to Hell Yes, which is a conversation that will change your life. It's something that we use in our businesses and in our family all the time. So you can get it for free at gettingtohellyes.com, or you can download it for 99 cents in the Kindle store on Amazon. Lastly, I have a brand new way for you to help support the amazing sponsors of this show and get some very cool things in your life. You can go to herrulesradio.com/shop. and find all of the wonderful makers and products that I use in my life that I have enjoyed making partnerships with. So go check out herrulesradio.com/shop, and we'll see you soon on the next episode. Thanks so much for joining us again on Her Rules Radio. You can check out Terri's big, beautiful Boundary Bootcamp at herrulesradio.com/shop. That'll take you directly to the free challenge and a special link just for the masterclass with Terri Cole on boundaries. You can sign up for both of those there for free. Again, go to herrulesradio.com/shop to get in on all of Terri's amazing boundary programs. And don't forget, go subscribe to the show in the iTunes store and leave a little review. It really helps to see a few words from a listener who enjoys the show. It helps other women and a few cool dudes to find the show. All right, see you next week.